now I want to go a little bit technical, but we're still going to keep it easy for everyone to understand. But the whole idea of bootstrapping versus funding.
Yeah.
Right? We all start with literally no money. Okay. We all have our savings and cash. So what was your initial bootstrapping strategy for LBB?
I don't even. So bootstrapping in essence, for those not familiar, is essentially, and the term comes from like literally tying up your boots, is trying to build a company living within your own means as the company, right?
Okay.
Where if that's from savings and investment, or if it's from any other source, essentially the concept is that whatever you've put in is all you have to kind of run it, and so it has a rate of growth limiter.
Right.
It acts as a rate of growth limiter, right? I think for us, bootstrapping strategy was actually just a traditional business strategy, which was like just make money.
Okay.
Like make revenue, right? Those are your means to your end, right?
You have this and now you need this.
like like any tradition, like before this whole startup world was so in vogue and so much out there. What was the traditional way to do it?
Right.
You did something, you sold something, you got something out of it, you put it back in the company, you went around, right?
Sure.
From the first day, we were always very focused on how is value and revenue being created, and making sure we're testing it, making sure we're actually getting that money in, and making sure we're using it effectively, right? So it was never really something that we said it was a strategy, right? It was a very normal thing to do.
It was just the way you functioned.
The way a business works, right? It's just that you did that. I think, and I think the difference between that and funding essentially just enables a rate of growth that's very, very different from what you are, right? So I think it's not, neither of them are what you might call it, like something to chase or something to say, I want to do this or that. It's just about what rate of growth do you want to grow? What rate of growth should your company grow?
Yeah.
And what is its outside kind of market and the size of that market that you want to go and capture, and how fast, right? And I think that is actually the bigger question. These are more choices you make.
Sure.
Right? You can go all the way by just doing it yourself and just bootstrapping, making revenue, investing it back, or you can go half the way or none of the way by raising a lot of money. Right? You can do either, and both could happen. But I think that's the way to really approach what you're doing.
So, but did you like burn a lot of cash in the beginning? Was it
Not
like it was a point where you were like, shit, okay, now I really need more money?
Not at all. We've I think since day one been very conscious about that, and I think we came very close in the very early days when we had like a really small team to like missing payroll, and that was one of the worst things an entrepreneur founder can have is the fact that you could miss payroll, right?
Right.
And so we've never actually been a high burn company. Even today, we've raised, our last Series A we raised with Inventus, and we had, we have the right amount of capital we need to get to where we want to go.
Sure.
But you have to use it consciously, wisely. You have to use it with an eye on where you're trying to go,
right?
And not really just pummel it into growth or doing what or do a burning if you don't have to, right? If the market doesn't demand that.
Would that mean like not using a lot of very fancy office spaces, not a lot of external software people, not high? Like what were the few tricks of the trade?
I think actually usually, and you'll see this in any type of financial report about any company, the burn comes from growth spending, right? It does not. So I think fancy offices, asset, infrastructure, that stuff is actually fairly controllable. In the sense that those are choices you're making as a personal choices, right? Growth is growth. Growth is market forces. Growth is consumer demographic shifting. Growth is geo suddenly coming alive. Growth is people going from Facebook to Instagram and things changing, right? And that you can't necessarily say, I don't like it this way. Sorry, like deal, right? The market is X, go, do what you need to do, right? So I think that's actually where you have to be very conscious and creative about how you grow, right? And conscious and creative in the sense, knowing what's giving you results, and conscious about what is your strength, and then creative about how you use it, because
so
there's not just one way.
Not spending that much on maybe a Facebook, Instagram because it's not, but spending it some other way.
Wherever,
you need
right?
To understand
and not maybe your entity does not require heavy cashbacks. Maybe your entity does not require heavy discounting. Whatever it is, right? What do you stand for? How can you creatively give that value to the end consumer?
Right.
That's what you need to figure out, right? So it can be done through different forms of media or marketing. It can be done through different forms of building talent that build great product, right?
Yeah.
It can be done through different forms of building supply.
Right.
There's a lot of ways to actually attack that creatively.
I know. Yeah.
And when you, LVB has, we've been fortunate to have great investors on board, but it definitely never is and never was easy to just get funding.
Right.
It never is easy.
Yeah.
And even if somebody's been heavily funded, they will always tell you it's not that easy as it looks on the front page, right? But
so picking from that, then you got seed funding, right? That's how you started, and now you're going well. So where was that moment where you decided, okay, fine, right, need funding?
I don't. So I think for us, and the way I've also learned how to think about funding, and I would encourage anybody who's thinking about funding, is that it's a means, it's a tactic, not an end. Right?
Okay.
And I think it takes some time to learn this, right?
Okay.
It takes some time to understand that, hey, I'm not doing all of this to raise funding, and capital just makes you go faster.
Okay.
And I think in the beginning, when you're doing angel rounds or seed rounds, it's on a hope, a wish, a dream, and some confidence of what you're doing and the size of the market, right? And because you're a small team, it's mostly on you guys, and it's mostly on the founders, and mostly on knowing that the size of the market is big enough that I can, if I inflect this, I can grow that that, right? There's not going to be a natural limitation to how many people want what I'm doing, and that's actually the value of the capital and the way you should think about it, and the way we thought about it. The way we thought about it was we were doing okay.
Yeah.
We're doing great actually.
Of course,
even in
everyone knows
right?
that.
In the early days, we were doing fantastic as well, and we continue to. But it was never a thing to do fantastic to raise money. It was like, hey, we have an opportunity to get some really great investors on board, the likes of Rajan Anandan, Sachin Bhatia. They're fantastic people, and they can not only add capital, but that's like part of it. But it really is the value and the mentorship you get. And is this going to be a way we can grow faster? And if the answer is yes, then let's do it, right? And
that's very interesting.
And
so
that's
it wasn't
the way to
that,
think about it.
Okay, we need money, let's now start the business plans, approach the thing. It was more on how much the money can help us do better.
And and I think what it makes founders do, and I can only say this in retrospect now that I've kind of gone through it. It makes founders also think about what is that capital being really raised for, right? What is that lever? And if you don't know the lever, if you don't know, a fancy office is not a lever.
It's not like that scam that hey, we got funding and then you get an article out of it. You just need to know why you're actually getting the funding.
And where are you going to put it? Like, what are you going to do? And as you fast forward from raising a small angel round to raising close to $6 million. And now as you look forward to raising more, if and when and what you want to do it for needs to at every stage become sharper. Right? At every stage it comes to this point where you have to be able to pinpoint saying, if I get X amount of money, this is exactly the point.
This is what
pain point, pressure point I will put that in.
Boss, it's gonna go.
It's not like I need team, right? It's become very different from that now. So it's interesting. So I think that's the way we've always approached it.
That's a very interesting
and
concept.
That's the way for anybody to approach it. Is just, and I think the other thing it makes you think about, which I don't think a lot of young founders today think about.
Right.
When you think about rate of growth and you think about this is my accelerator to rate of growth.
Yeah.
Thinking about how big that market is and who am I in that market?
Right.
Can I actually affect the rate of growth in that market? Right. So for us, for example, we work with small to medium sized businesses across different categories. Right. That market is a very difficult market. Right, it's not an easy market.
It's a changing market.
It's a changing market. Consumer habits is one thing, but merchants are not used to using technology to drive growth. So whatever you do in terms of funding or money or whatever, there's still a natural tendency of the market to help to make you understand what scale it will go to and what speed it will go at. Right, and I think that very few people think about early on. And I think that's super important because you also realize what funding is needed.
Of course.
At what stage, which is really good to know because you can plan out much better.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm a newbie startup person. There are lots of us. There are a lot of people who are probably in the middle space and don't know the next steps. Any advice to give to these people, in the last sense? If you're approaching, the funding, you've done it, you've been there.
I feel
what is the way to do it? To get professional help, friends and family?
People to give advice.
No, but you're the LVB co-founder, which is doing really well.
So that's specifically for funding, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so if you don't have a lot of idea and you're going towards it, would you look into accelerators? Would you look into friends and family? Like, would you?
So I'll tell you where I have experience.
Yes,
because
of
I don't
course.
have experience with accelerators and incubators.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I could not speak to them. Right?
Sure.
I think in the specifically when you're very early or at least like mid stage where you haven't really got your groove. I think the important thing to do is be very very conscious and very studied and very aware of the consumer and the market, and be as precise and sharp about what you're trying to do
Sure.
for that consumer and market. So what I mean by that, right?
Yeah.
The best conversations have to infect the person about the problem and about the size of the problem, not the solution you have.
Okay.
So the best conversations you have with anybody early on to try and raise money when you haven't really made much proof in your potential yet, is to be able to tell them the size of the market, tell them why you're the one poised for it, tell them what consumer insight you have that's different from everybody else, right? Tell them what about your background can attack it really well, right?
Sure.
And I think if you can be really
Niche and different.
not niche and different in how you solve it, very specific in how you understood it, and very and very clear and articulate, right, about what it is that you want in a bigger picture.
Right.
That's really what's important. And I think it's something that you have to work on. It's something you have to understand, because again, when you're starting out, you have a dream and a vision that you've been telling yourself.
Right.
It's delusional optimism is happening, right?
Every morning.
And actually, if you think about it, you tell yourself probably 10,000 times more than you've told someone else, and then you have these limited interactions with people, which will determine if you get what you want, which is in this case is funding. And it's, by the way, applies to hiring also, early days, right? Same thing. It's you have to convince someone of the scale and magnitude of the problem, why it's important. And you have to be able to tell them in your own way why you're the right person for it. And you don't do it enough. You don't wake up in the morning, brush your teeth and pitch to yourself. You don't. You should, but you don't.
So forget elevator pitches, let's do mirror pitches.
Because you're just not there. In your brain, you're there. You're not necessarily there in conversation, in breaking it down for someone else to come in. And that, I think, is the biggest advice I can give, is figure it out. Figure that out. Figure what it is for you, how you want to do it. You may not be a big talker. Maybe you do it through data. Maybe you do it through softer conversation. The beauty is, at least the funding environment, the way it stands at every stage, investors have over the last, I think, 10 years of the ecosystem evolving, there's so much more savvier and understanding of the types of founders and where they come from are not going to be cookie cutter. So I have to give it to, that credit you have to give. I think it's still hard for women, by the way, and I think that's something that I'm we all are personally at LVB very passionate about, hoping to make a dent on. But I do think it at least has moved beyond has to be IIT and has to be, right? I think that hopefully that's gone, and now it's expanding understand folks who come from a very science background, who may not be with all the charisma and pizzazz of Vijay Shekhar Sharma, and it's fine and it's okay. I think that's changed. So now it's up to the onus on the entrepreneur to do that, right, and to make that happen. And I think for women, it's still challenging, but it's also changing because there's enough awareness about it. And I think women are doing a great job. A lot of women in the ecosystem are doing a great job of actually changing the conversation and showing other women entrepreneurs how it's done as well. So
happy you brought that up. It needs a co-founder of women. All right, so thank you so much for this, Dhruv. This was actually really insightful and very detailed. So it was great, and I think our viewers are going to really enjoy it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.